Good evening, calendar cats. I have an important paper here to report, written by Dr. Stephen Pfann, Pfann, from the University of the Holy Land, that gives us amateurs several important characteristics of the Qumran calendars that we are working so hard to concelebrate. This paper is entitled, A Reassessment of Qumran's Calendars, plural. Today, a growing number of scholars have come to the conclusion that at least 3 or 4 divergent groups who disagreed on a number of halakhic issues are represented among the scrolls from Qumran: the Yahad, the Temple Scroll group, the 4QMMT group, and the Enoch group. Experts in religious law like Lawrence Schiffman and Joseph Baumgarten noted irreconcilable differences between the Temple Scroll and the other Dead Sea Scrolls. Those who have specialized in liturgy have found diversity. Hymns among the Qumran corpus differ in terminology. Even those who worked on the Song of the Sabbath Sacrifice, once considered key for establishing the unity of the manuscripts found in Cave 4, 11, and Masada, now are convinced that it is not a fit for Qumran's Yahad, although there has been considerable evidence that some form of revelation was available to Yahad members with respect to the reading and interpretation of Scripture, that is, the Pesher. It's not clear that the group had a monopoly on this form of inspired interpretation. There is a wider challenge that the various prophetic and apocalyptic works, if any, were actually produced by the group's members. As a norm, pseudepigraphy was not a method utilized by the Yahad Qumran community for establishing the authority of its compositions. Of the previously unknown legendary, apocryphal, and pseudepigraphic works found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, none have been convincingly linked to the authors of that community. Moreover, doctrine is not the only aspect indicating that the Qumran caves are not a unified whole. Other salient features include such aspects as date range, scroll material, language, and scribal protocols. Even the 60 to 100 manuscripts written in the various branches of the Cryptic A script, once considered a unique feature of the Qumran community, now appear to diverge stylistically along lines similar to that of halakhic practice, liturgy, revelation, and doctrine mentioned above. In addition, the material culture associated with each cave and its scrolls must be examined and compared, including especially pottery forms, clay sources, and textiles. Last but not least, the location of the caves with respect to each other and with respect to Qumran itself may be an indicator of ownership. It is high time to abandon the monolithic approach to the caves that assumes that all the caves shared a common owner or origin. Rather, each cave must be assessed on its own merits. Since there remains no compelling reason to uphold the notion of unified doctrine among the scrolls, it would seem reasonable to re-examine the distinctive nature of the calendars associated with the key and defining doctrinally based scrolls. Of the major and distinctive rule books associated with the various groups mentioned above, at least one exemplar of each has a specific calendar either attached to or embedded within. For instance, 4Q319 attached to the 4Q259, the 4Q394 is attached to the 4QMMT. There are feasts and calendars defined within 11QTA and Jubilees, and the astronomical book of Enoch was included within 1st Enoch. The most noticeable features that distinguishes and subdivides the calendars into separate groups comes from a comparison of the festivals that are observed during the course of the year. One calendar held by the 1st Enoch and 4Q317 lunisolar calendar, that is Group A, does not indicate that it follows any feast days at all, but hints at the cycle of Sabbaths and is lunisolar in form. Another set of calendars, connected with the 4QMMT and the Temple Scroll, observes a number of biblical feasts, but also incorporates a series of additional feasts, which are part of a Pentacontad cycle.
Oh, brother, I think you mean Pentacontad, not Pentecostal. Pentacontad, based on 50.
Oh, yeah. Each is separated by 49 days from the preceding feast. This is Group B. Yet another set of calendars connected with the Yahad, especially 4Q319, limits its feasts to those which are expressly commanded to be observed in the Bible, Group C. It would appear from this that there is in a particular clear dissimilarity between the 364-day calendars utilized by the Yahad, on the one hand, and the Temple Scroll and the MMT group on the other. Well, this is a breakthrough that Gabriele Boccaccini showed us in his Beyond the Essene Hypothesis book 20 years ago. And what they're saying in a nutshell is there are actually 4 groups of literature conveyed by the calendars they use, for those calendars are different. What began in the Enochic literature as a 360-day lunisolar calendar was subsequently modified to support a 364-day solar calendar. In the minds of the authors, the Enochic calendar and the 4Q317 lunisolar calendar represent a heavenly-based system that operates independently of the earthly sphere. CF, the astronomical book, where the two legitimate systems merely need to be synchronized. Time in heaven is precise and unchanging, while time on earth is warped and inexact. Time in heaven is base 60, with which time on earth does not agree. In heaven, the calendar makes sense. It hasn't changed, and the perceived incongruences with any earthly calendar are merely coincidental due to Earth's imperfection. Those imperfections caused by the sin of the Watchers, humankind, and the giants. Whatever seasonal feast days humankind should decide to impose upon the calendar, heaven will not adjust its clock nor hurry to catch up. Not even the Sabbaths are enumerated, as though the creation of the universe in 7 days and the 7-day solar week were originally peripheral to heavenly time. Since the earthly sphere is no longer synchronized with the heavenly base 60 system, humankind may artificially add 1 day per quarter or 5 days at the end of the year, as did the secular Egyptian calendar. It was the observance of a 7-day week that made it necessary to intercalate 4 days so that the year itself would be divisible evenly by 7. At the same time, the Enochic calendar sought to provide a synchronization of the 354-day lunar and the 364-day solar calendars. This required that one extra 30-day month be inserted at the end of each 3-year lunar cycle. Lunar cycle, not solar cycle. Since the yearly shortfall of 10 days led to a shortfall of 30 days after 3 years, the intercalation of a single 30-day lunar month would seem to do the trick. However, in reality, lunar months are actually 29.5 days long, which leaves a discrepancy of half a day. By the end of the next 3-year cycle, the discrepancy increases to a full day. After another 6 years, the discrepancy increases to 2 days, and so forth. After 30 years, the discrepancy would be half a month. These apparently naive forms of intercalation did not actually fix the 365.25-day clock. The incongruence of the heavenly calendar with the earthly, perceived by a mortal who has ascended to heaven, cannot be fixed until the root of the problem, that is, the sin of humankind, is resolved. 1 Enoch 80:2. And in the days of the sinners the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy on their lands and fields. And all things on the earth shall alter, and shall not appear in their time. And the rain shall be kept back, and the heaven shall withhold it. And when I first read this is me now, some years ago, I figured that was speaking of either a solar or a lunar calendar, especially a lunar calendar, that was never intercalated, for after a certain time period, the calendar would no longer be in step with the procession of the seasons. I think that we at the Yahad have come upon one way to fix that without any intercalation except for the 4 days that Enoch points out at the end of the 1 day at the end of each season. 4 seasons, 4 days. We should not have to intercalate if we attach the beginning of the year each year to the solstice. And I've talked about this and written about this plenty. You can find more on it on Jackson Snyder Presents. Now back to Stephen Pfann. Although lacking the precision of the Aramaic Enochic astronomical book, which includes the rising and setting of the moon through the various gates, the cryptic A manuscripts of 4Q317 Lunisolar Calendar provide a broader sampling of the calendar. 4Q317 traces the phases of the moon throughout a cycle of 364-day solar years. Neither feast days nor Mishmarot are mentioned. The observance of the 7-day week, Sabbath, is clear, however, in which case the scroll does mention certain days of the week, but only with respect to the appearance of the first day of the week upon which the moon begins to wax or wane. In all 4Q317 manuscripts, virtually every date in the solar month has been modified by a second scribe to read 1 day later than the date written by the first scribal hand. Dr. Lokchi, or Dr. Lucky, needs to read this little blurb. In his Enochian calendar, the year starts on a Thursday, just like the second scribe here has in 4Q317. Back to Pfann again. It is possible that the calendar was being modified to conform to a Jubilees-based creation day, where the moon is created after the sun, cf. Genesis 1:14-18, thereby making the full moon visible only as the sun sets at the end of the first day of the month. Thus, the full moon is only visible on Wednesday evening, that is, the evening of the 5th day. I thought Wednesday was the 4th day. The enumeration of months is according to a solar calendar of 30 days, or 31 days if intercalated, each. The various feast days and priestly courses that appear in other calendrical documents do not appear in either the 4Q Enoch or the 4Q lunisolar calendars, remembering that we have in the scrolls at least 4 different calendars. However, this doesn't mean that the authors didn't observe a liturgical year. Neither of these calendars allows much room for these feasts to be incorporated and still remain within the space of a single scroll. On the other hand, the feasts, whether biblical or Pentacontad, are noticeably missing in the Enochic literature in general. Here's my comment. I have always said that Enoch does not have a calendar. It has some general observations, both of sun and moon. But in order to have a calendar, you have to have something marked on it, like, for instance, the feasts. Enoch doesn't mention any feasts at all. Back to the text. Here's a note, 281. The Book of Jubilees interprets this error to be due to humankind's abandonment of the festivals and Sabbaths, and their erring, quote, regarding the beginning of the month, the Sabbath, and the Jubilee. That's Jubilees 1:14. This is also likely the reason that the rest of the calendars of Group B rejected outright the lunar calendar in their calculations. So that ends what we have on Group A. Group A, again, includes the Enochian and the Qumran cryptic lunisolar calendars. Group A. Let's go on to Group B, which they call the Pentacontad Calendar. Group B includes the Book of Jubilees, 4Q324D through H, cryptic A, Festal Calendar, 4QMMT, the Temple Scroll, and 4Q365RP. It typically contains at least 4 Pentacontad feasts, which is abbreviated as PF, incorporated into the biblical festival scheme. It also characteristically lacks the biblical festival of Second Passover. Let's help each other. The definition of Pentacontad, or Pentacontad, the Pentacontad calendar is a unique agricultural calendar system thought to be of Amorite origin, in which the year is broken down into 7 periods of 50 days. There we have the Pente, with an annual supplement of 15 or 16 days, identified and reconstructed by Hildegard and Julius Levy in the 1940s. The calendar's use dates back to at least the 3rd millennium BC, in western Mesopotamia and surrounding areas. Used well into the modern age, forms of it have been found in Nestorianism and among the Fellahin of modern Palestine. Tawfiq Kanan, died 1968, described the use of such a calendar among people in southern Palestine, as did his contemporary, Gustav Dahlmann, who wrote of the practices of Muslim agriculturists who use Christian designations for the 50th day, quote, which in turn overlaid far more ancient agricultural practices, grape watching, grape pressing, sowing, etc. So, now we know about Pentacontad, and that is about as clear as mud. Let's just remember that the calendar is based on 50-day months. Now we'll go back to the text. And once again, this next section is describing Group B, those of the Pentacontad Calendar, including the Book of Jubilees and the Temple Scroll, 4Q365RP. And here's what that calendar reads. Month 1, Day 1, Tekufa, or in Jubilees it's called the Day of Remembrance. Month 1, Day 14, Passover. Month 1, Day 15, Feast of Unleavened Bread. Month 1, Day 26, Feast of Barley, which is a Pentacontad feast. Month 3, Day 15, Feast of Weeks. That's the second Pentacontad feast, Pentacontad. Let me get that right. Third month, 15th day, also known as the Feast of First Fruits. Fourth month, first day, Tekufa, or in Jubilees, another day of remembrance. Fifth month, third day, Feast of New Wine, Pentacontad number 3. Month 6, Day 22, Feast of New Oil, yet another Pentacontad feast, number 4. 6th month, 23rd day is the wood offering. 7th month, first day, Tekufa, this time both in Jubilees and the Temple Scroll as the Day of Remembrance. 7th month, 10th day, Day of Atonement. 7th month, 15th day, Feast of Tabernacles. 7th month, 22nd day, Solemn Assembly. 10th month, first day, Tekufa, or in Jubilees, Day of Remembrance. 12th month, 29th day, a Feast of Ingathering, which is the 8th Pentacontad feast. This calendar adopted the same 364-day solar calendar found in 1st Enoch, but without integrating the lunar phases. In the Book of Jubilees, the calendrical and festal years are determined solely by yearly circuit of the earth around the sun, and subsequently the movement of the stars, ignoring the phases of the moon. The days of the month were schematized, with every month made up of 30 days, with an intercalary day added every third month. This most complete form of this calendar is found in 4Q 324 D through H Cryptic A Festal Calendar, and 4Q 394 1 through 2 Calendrical Document D, and the 4Q 394 Mixat Ma'asa Torah MMT, which details the Sabbaths and festivals within a single solar year. In the conception of the Pentacontad calendars, perfect time is built upon sevens. A. 7 days constitute a week. B. 7 weeks constitute a Pentacontad cycle. C. 7 Pentacontad cycles constitute a year. D. 7 years constitute a sabbatical cycle. E. And 7 sabbatical cycles constitute a jubilee. Similarly, according to Philo, the Therapeutai counted time in 7. Although not one of the calendars from Qumran preserves the entire set of 7s, particularly item C, the 7 Pentacontad cycles constituting a year, the sizable lacuna left in the manuscripts, that is a hole, coinciding with the latter months of the year, would allow for such a scenario. So it's probably there, but it's probably been torn out. Now we go to the Yahad's calendar, that is the group C, including the Serach HaYahad, 4Q320, 4Q321, 4Q321A Mishmarot, and 4Q503 Daily Prayers. These are 364-day biblical festal calendars, which notably include second Passover. They do, however, include a day of remembrance which coincides with the halfway point, approximately the autumnal equinox in the year. It contains the most streamlined festal schedule. And to be right honest with you in regards to the calendar that we are pursuing, of course, it's going to be the Yahad Calendar, which includes these festal dates. Month 1, Day 14, Passover. Month 1, Day 26, Raising of the Omer. Month 2, 14, second Passover. Month 3, 15, Feast of Weeks. Month 7, day 1, Day of Remembrance. Month 7, day 10, Day of Atonement. Month 7, day 15, Feast of Tabernacles. That's it. The most exhaustive collection of calendars intrinsically connect with the Yahad and its literature was found attached to a single copy of the community rule, 4Q259, or 4QS, Serek, dubbed 4Q319 OTOT, whatever that means. I don't know. That's the same text as the community rule, which I'm surprised they still call it that anymore. It should be called the Yahad rule. The Yahad's 364-day festal calendar contained all the biblical feasts, including second Passover. That is the 4Q319 OTOT, 13 and 1. Although the cycle of the moon is accounted for and is synchronized with the solar year, the feasts are defined by the sequence of days in the solar year. Akin to 4Q319, the lunisolar calendars of 4Q320, 4Q321, and 4Q321A include all of the feasts exactly as I just listed, and at the same time provide the Enochian synchronization of the 354-day lunar and 364-day solar calendars, but starting the cycle from creation day, according to 4Q321 I3. This indicates that the lunisolar calendar was created by Elohim to be accurate as of the beginning of creation. Perhaps this is intended to support the Enochic view that the subsequent sins of the watchers and humankind upset the accuracy of the originally perfect calendar. The creation of the synchronized calendar may not have been simple naivete, but may represent the ideal cycle set in place at creation, thus the term creation day, which was no longer in effect due to some event that changed the cycle by just that much. 1 day every 6 years per lunar year, and 1.25 days per solar year. The relevance of heavenly time to the events on earth is manifested in the apparent synchronization of the cycle of the heavenly bodies, the stars, with the progression of the agricultural year. The liturgical year, whether biblical or Pentacontad in its cycle, must be reset regularly, so as not to be out of sync with heaven. Whether heaven and earth are intended to celebrate the feasts together appears to be the subject of an ongoing debate among groups. Absolutely an ongoing debate, not just with these scholars, but we who actually put these calendars in practice. And what he's saying here that is relevant to what we do is that each year has to be connected to the equinox in the same way. And this is where I differ from those who in 2022 started the first day of the year at March 23rd, because the equinox was supposedly on Sunday. I say it was supposed to be started on March 30th. Why? Because if the equinox happened on Sunday, whatever the definition of a day is, the classic formula is to go to the first day before going to the fourth. If the equinox already happened on the first day, that day's wasted. You must go to the next Sunday for your first day, then mark 4 days in to Wednesday in order to find the first day of the year. I'm thinking from my observations that the vast majority have figured the fourth day without a first day and are celebrating March 23rd as the beginning of the year. And I'm going to think that as exacting as these Qumran calendar makers are, they would not let that stand. You have to go to a clean first day before you can get to the right fourth day. And if the equinox is on first day, second day, third day, you're going to have to go to that next Sunday. You can't just pick out the next Wednesday to start out your year. You have broken the logic. But however you do it, in order to chase away intercalation, you've got to set each year up the same way. And that's why I say that the last 4 or 5 months of the festive calendar were ignored because there were no feasts in those days. The people went back to their secular calendar, which was, at least in the time of Yeshua, the lunisolar calendar. The text goes on, Whether heaven and earth are intended to celebrate the feasts together appears to be the subject of an ongoing debate among the groups. Yes, I said that. If there is intended to be a con-celebration of the heavenly hosts and humankind, that is to say, if in heaven and on earth a feast is to be coordinated to happen in the same time frame, it seems pretty obvious as to who is awarded the privilege to set the schedule of worship. It's up to the priests to hear or to confirm the days of heaven's yearly feasts and the precise time of heaven's daily prayers. And really, in my last paragraph concerning the first day of the year, I am confirming the days of heaven's yearly feasts by confirming the precise time that the year starts. Again, in this year, 2022, it does not follow a pattern. If you started that year March 23rd. But I know everyone did. A lot of people did. Some people wrote into me and said that what I propose is more logical, and it is. But if you started on the 23rd this year, and you're with a group that starts on the 23rd, your best bet is to do what the group does until next year. Who knows? Maybe more scrolls that'll tell us exactly which one it was. Which day it is will pop out of the ground. But if you want to get on what seems to be the most logical and may be the same time as heaven's feasts, then you may want to reconsider having your first day of the year, which is the fourth day of the week, without a living first day. That is, a first day where the equinox is on the same day. That's a used-up day. From a certain standpoint, these calendars share some very important features, in particular a 364-day solar calendar. All the groups who held to these calendars set themselves apart from others who favored a lunar calendar, which would make con-celebration of the festivals in all ways impossible. There are a number of features that would make a con-celebration between the groups who held to a 364-day solar calendar. Again, those are groups A, B, and C. What were those three again? Enochian, Jubilees, and Yahad. On the other hand, there are also certain incongruences that can be drawn between various calendars, especially between Group B and within Group C, where the yearly sequence of feasts is not always agreed upon. Although these distinctions may have been seen as a nuisance by groups attempting to share a liturgical year, it still may not have inhibited the con-celebration of certain agreed biblical feasts. What's happened here is we're getting down to early calendars that certainly are far earlier and closer to the time of the tabernacle than any of these contrived Jewish calendars, be they lunar or contrived by the rabbinate, unless Elohim changes. But you see, by the time this literature came along with its calendars, there were already disputes. There were already disputes about it. One thing seems for sure, at least most feasible, and that is that the tabernacle and First Temple calendar were 364-day solar calendars. So much better, so much superior to moon calendars, so much easy to configure. Every person can configure the feasts every year. It does not take some genius in Jerusalem or wherever, Jamnia, to do it for you. You can do it if you simply make up your mind on how that first day of the year should be calculated. And again, we've talked about three different groups at Qumran. There are three different groups, it seems to me, here as well that can't get on the same page. Those that put the beginning of the year, the first Wednesday after the equinox, no matter when the equinox comes. What did I say? On the Wednesday after the equinox, no matter if the equinox comes on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday. Second, those who kind of follow what I come up with here, and that is to say you've got to have a clean Sunday. You've got to have a clean first day before you can have a fourth day, that fourth day being the beginning of the year. You can't use the Sunday that the equinox came on, or you can't use the Wednesday when the equinox is after Sunday. You got to get a clean Sunday. And then a third way is very similar to our way, except its first day is a Thursday. If you're a Thursday person on the Enochian calendar, you let me know. I've got a book about that written by Dr. Lucky that goes through the entire Thursday kind of solar Qumran style calendar. And I'll send you a copy of it. But you've got to get a hold of me, www.yahad.me. And as long as I have them, I'll send you one. And here's the conclusion by Dr. Pfann. Number 1, the long-standing assumption that the caves represent the doctrine and practice of a single group is no longer accepted. Well, it took these scholars 20 to 30 years to come to that conclusion, which, if you looked at the Scrolls King, Gabriele Boccaccini, he came out with a book explaining all that years ago. Second, one area where this is clearly seen is in the study of the calendars. This paper has suggested that the calendar system is even more complex than just two major systems, having multiple variations and nuances depending on adherence. To me, 3 different methods are not that complex. We have the same thing today. What is complex is trying to get everybody on the same page. Number 3, while the solar calendars share a 364-day year, they differ in significant details, particularly in the schedule and names of the festal celebrations. Feast days in particular are indicators of group identification. That is, compare the 3 Christmases and 3 Easters celebrated in the Holy Land today. This data must be taken seriously. Groups celebrate their feasts only according to their specific festal calendar. This paper has distinguished at least 3 major and separate kinds of calendars among the scrolls based on these festal systems and has illustrated how these distinct systems indicate that their practitioners come from a distinct group. All right, all you calendar creators, according to Stephen Pfann in this essay, there are 3 Qumran calendars, and they're not the same. And although this might be a little dismaying, it's a good thing to know the truth. Now I'm going to get a hold of Stephen Pfann this week in Israel and see if there's any new scholarship in regards to how the first day of the year is calculated from the equinox. And I'll let you know. In the meantime, from myself and from the Vero Essin Yahad, keep studying. Elohim is an Elohim of truth, not opinion. May Yahweh blast you with anointing and assurance. And when and if you get that anointing and assurance, remember that blessing came from my mouth. Let me know what you've been given at www.yahad.me. I'm happy to hear from you. And if you would like to have copies of all these essays I've been reading, I'd be happy to send them to you in email. Free, of course, if you will just ask for them. When you go out to the contact form, why don't you just write in the request for the calendar pack? I have quite a few excellent scholarly essays and calendars. And I'm sure that if you're concerned about this, you can restore the strength of your mind by learning what those who do this all day and all night as careers have learned from their time set in study of these texts. Because let me tell you, you ever try to study these texts, it isn't easy. Like somebody says, oh, what version of the Dead Sea Scrolls should I get? I'm going out. And get it so I can read it. You won't be reading it long. It's too hard. Except, I'd say 3 or 4 texts. That's all right. Get it anyway. As you know, in the Yahad and our Shabbat services at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, each Shabbat, we do use liturgy from the Dead Sea Scrolls. We use liturgy from the Didache and other wonderful early texts to help us to worship in the way that Elohim wants and expects. Have a great matzah feast.
You don't have any place to go on Shabbat to fulfill the commandment for a holy convocation? Come join us online every Shabbat at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Download and install the client from zoom.us. And when the time comes, just surf to www.theyahad.com. It's that easy. You can be anonymous if you want to. You're going to hear a great liturgy and an even greater sermon every week. Pretty soon you'll get to know the people that come, and you'll feel good knowing that you worshiped on Shabbat with other like-minded believers. You're invited. Download and install the Zoom meeting client from zoom.us and then surf to theyahad.com. See you there!